So just a couple quick notes. You've found the meetup site, so you to register for this, but keep an eye there. We do these events every month. I'd love to see you back if this is your first, and we'll see you back if you're a regular too. We also have a Slack channel that we've been trying to kind of get some build some activity and community around there. We've got some good conversations that go on there. Including things like sharing job openings. So we will drop an invitation to that in the chat. We'd love to have you join us there if you're interested. And then you can follow us on Twitter. And if you happen to tweet about tonight or anything, please use our credentials there, our hashtags. So I'm also going to give this kind of one more promotion. We've been doing a survey of our attendees and our membership, just to kind of, even though this is kind of says the Seattle meetup, we're trying to kind of get a good sense of just the topics that people are interested in and the kind of events that might be good to put on. So we'll put a link to this in the chat as well. If you haven't filled it out, if you'd be willing to give us, seriously, we'll take maybe 5 minutes of your time, but we're just trying to get it just helps us get a sense of kind of what folks are interested in, what they're doing, what topics might be good as we're looking for, preparing, upcoming events. So we'll drop that in the chat as well. Up next, as I said, we do these every month. So we do have an event coming up in September, September 14th. Chris Saunders will be talking about content across channels, tips and tricks for modeling modular customer experiences. If you know Chris Saunders at all, he's kind of the guy to talk to about things like structured content, and I expect this will be a really interesting event too. So put that on your calendars or watch our meetup site or our Slack channel or our newsletter. And now, before we get started, I want to just toss it real quickly. Larry Asher is here from School of Visual Concepts. And he's going to just take a couple of minutes to tell us about a program that they're launching that will be of interest to a lot of you.
That always happens, doesn't it? I want to thank you, Paula and Heidi and Larry, for letting me barge in like this, because I know you've got a lot to get going here with the panel discussion. But boy, this sure seemed like an appropriate topic, and so. I just want the rest of you to know I did a fair amount of begging, and it worked. So here I am. And the reason this is so appropriate is because at the School of Visual Concepts, we're the little yellow star on your picture. We have introduced some things over the years, but this fall we're introducing something highly appropriate. Just a teeny bit of history. These are the founders of this school. That's Cherry Brown in the lower left and her husband Dick Brown in the upper left. And he, by the way, made aviators cool long before Joe Biden did. And they were teaching up at Cornish here in Seattle in the late 60s, and they heard about the School of Visual Arts in New York and this notion that they had of just have working professionals do the teaching. And so they quit their Cornish jobs, started School of Visual Concepts, and we've been pursuing that model now for, I can hardly believe I'm saying this, 50 years. And it's still holding true. These are some of the people who teach in our certificate programs, and I'm guessing you might know some of them. In fact, maybe you are some of them. But the gist of this is we really do believe in bringing in very senior people for the obvious benefit of they know what they're talking about, and also the benefit that they can help our students connect with people in the working world. And so in addition to some of the folks you see here, I can name some other instructors that you might know, besides Tori. Ellie Cyril, your own Paula Land has been an SVC instructor. Scott Kuby, who's now in Tucson. Courtney Komodo, who you see here, she's in Northern California, but is a content designer at Airbnb. Melissa Antonelli from Zillow, Andy Fitzgerald, Sarah Yates from Amazon, and crossing fingers, but I think we're going to maybe convince Larry Swanson to teach a course here, and also Ada Powers and Jonathan McFadden and Preston So. I gotta, tip my hat to COVID. Thank you, COVID, for letting us attract instructors from really anywhere now. So this is the program that will be rolling out this fall. It is a 15-month program. Oh, that's a long time, you say. But these courses are all taught in the evening. So the theory is you can keep your day job, come to school at night, 1 or 2 nights a week, an occasional Saturday morning workshop, while you put together a portfolio to prepare for your next job. And there's a lot to read here, I grant you, but the gist of this track is the first third of it is pretty much a foundational UX course. And because we may be UX writers, but the UX part is perhaps in some cases a bigger chunk of your time than the writer part. And so we think that's a really essential part of this program. People wonder, and it's the obvious question to ask, like, so does this work? Do people actually get jobs after they go through these programs? Well, this is a new program, but we've had a UX design program since 2016, and these are some of the places where our students have landed. And some of these, incidentally, are content design jobs. So we feel pretty good about this, that they're not just getting work, they're getting work at some of the top organizations. So if this is of interest to you, and you can be interested in multiple ways here, I assume if you came to this meetup, you might be interested in breaking into the field, so we could help you do that. So that would be someone who would come here to learn. But many of you are working professionals yourselves, and boy, would I like to talk to you and meet you. So if you have any interest in teaching, mentoring, serving as a teaching assistant, serving as an evaluator on our portfolio presentations, I would love it if you could jot down my email. I can stick it in the chat, of course, and give me a shout. And you'll also, of course, find information on this certificate program, and you can spend a little more time with that course track on our website. Anyway, thank you again for letting me interrupt, and on with your show.
Thanks, Larry. Actually, I'm gonna interrupt you just for a second because we actually have a question about whether the program is online or in person only. So I'll give you a chance to respond to that before we take it back from you.
Well, that is another, again, thank you to COVID. I was joking earlier, it's like the director of strategy here at SVC is COVID, because we had sure not planned to do this. But things have changed so rapidly, and that you saw some of those instructors that we're able to attract now, and I can go over here to the bookshelf and pull up the books that they've written or the podcasts that they put together. It's like they're everywhere, and we think that's a trade-off worth making. And so to get really the top names to come in and teach you is worth whatever downside there is to not being in a room together. That said, our intention for people in the Seattle area is that we will be doing social events, so you can meet the local instructors and your classmates at least once a quarter. So I wouldn't exactly call that a hybrid setup, but it's getting a little closer.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
And definitely, shout out to SVC. They've been good. Just an incredible resource in this area. And, and I'm not saying that just because I got to teach there, but
and now,
it really is.
Now in every area.
Yes. Going worldwide now. All right. So let's move on to our event tonight. Speaking of getting jobs in content and learning skills. We are excited tonight. So rather than do kind of a long intro to each of our panelists, because I want them to just kind of talk about their own experiences as they get started here. But just as a reminder here, we have Ariel van Spronsen, Theo Karatzas, and Lily Supardon. And I wanted to say, kind of how this event came about. So Ariel wrote an article for Medium, and we'll put a link to this in the chat, called "Don't Call It a Comeback: Coming Home to Content Strategy After a Career Hiatus." And Ariel's one of our regulars, and actually way back in the day, she and I kind of overlapped a bit doing some freelance for one of the local agencies here. So we've kind of been in, obviously sort of in touch over the years. And when I saw that article, I thought this is a great topic for the meetup. And then I thought, well, this would really lend itself, to doing this kind of panel event, so that we could kind of get different perspectives. And so kind of put this together, including so Theo, who is at PayPal, who's a senior content designer at PayPal, Ariel, who's a senior content strategist at Expedia, and Lily, who's a recruiter at Dropbox. And they've all had fairly recent experiences with changing jobs, or kind of coming back into the field in Ariel's case. So I thought it would be a really just an interesting conversation. So I'm going to just go ahead and throw it over to Ariel. Just as a reminder, if you have questions that you'd like to ask as we go, put your questions in the chat. And when we get kind of to the end of their discussion, then we'll kind of open it up and let there be some back and forth discussion. So with that, I'm going to toss it to Ariel.
All righty. Thanks, Paula. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, I don't even want to think about how many years ago that was that we worked together. That was a long time ago. But what that does speak to is that I've been in the field for a long time, but for a hiatus. I had a little hiatus in which I became a hairstylist. And so for me, this work of getting a job was actually coming back from a career change. And time really goes fast in tech. 3 years away is not a really long time in most areas, but in tech, that's really an eon. So I had to do a lot of relearning and a lot of reestablishing myself as part of the community to get a job. So that's just a little bit about me. I also want to introduce my my co-panelists here. First, I'll have Theo Karatzas give a little bit of information about herself.
Yeah, thanks, Ariel. My name is Theo. My pronouns are she, her. I live in San Francisco, and I'm a senior content designer at PayPal. I cover the giving platform, so any charity donation related products. Ariel, you wanted us to include a fun fact of some kind. I think.
Fun fact.
My fun fact is I have a few, but my fun fact that I like to share usually is that I'm a classically trained flutist with 15 years of flute training, and I can still play. I wear my sunglasses at night by ear on the flute, I think. It's been a couple of years.
Bravo, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then our third co-panelist, Lily Supardon. Give her a little bit of information about yourself.
Hi, thanks. I don't know how I'm going to follow Theo's introduction. My life is not that exciting. I'm Lily Supardan. I actually live in Palm Springs and part of the time in Seattle. I am a recruiter with Dropbox, and my fun fact is Ariel and I have gone back. We go back a long ways and a lot of overlap. But I actually teach Bar 3 classes on the side for the Seattle studio, but I live in Palm Springs, so I only teach via Zoom. However, I am going to be in studio next week for the first time since 2019. So if anyone is in the Seattle area and is a Bar 3 client, it's going to get real awkward because I have not been in front of people for a long time. So just going to throw that out there. Be prepared.
Woohoo! What day is that, Lily?
Thursday, Friday, and Sunday.
All right, I'll definitely come to one of your classes. That's so fun. That's great. Thanks, guys, for just a little bit of info about you, which kind of takes me into the first question that I want to bring to you guys, which is tell me a little bit about your career progression, and this is specifically for Theo, what did you do before you were a content designer, and how did you break into the field?
Yeah, my road into content design was a little weird, but I feel like everybody's kind of is, and it's part of why I love our profession is like there's no one journey into what we do. So I was a journalist in college and wanted to be a writer. I got a degree in philosophy and studied a couple different languages and was kind of bouncing around and ended up falling into the music industry, and worked there for probably a little over 10 years, doing radio, producing concerts and festivals, and working at a couple record labels, and then actually at the Symphony in San Francisco for a little while too. But towards the end of that time, when I was working at the Symphony and then this label before that, I just started kind of feeling like that job wasn't really serving my goals. I also lost a couple jobs. I got fired 2 times in a row for my last 2 music jobs, which is like the first time I'd ever lost a job before. I have a friend who always tells me not to say that I got fired because she's like, you should say you got laid off because that's really what happened. And I was like, no, I felt like I got fired, and feel like it's more true to my feelings about that. So around then I started going back into writing, and I got into a graduate program that had a pretty heavy design element to it. It's a media studies program. And through that, I started kind of finding UX and like kind of finding UX writing. My partner was actually the one who suggested I get into user experience. And so, yeah, I got really lucky. I found an internship because I was a student, and that really opened a ton of doors and kind of solidified that like, this is the thing I really wanted to be doing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you've landed yourself a job. You are a senior content designer at PayPal.
Yep.
Nice. That's wonderful.
Just hit my 1-year anniversary.
That's so great. I also love to talk about your academic background a little bit. On the side, Theo is a scholar, and I'll let her tell you a little bit about what her scholarly pursuits are about.
Yeah, actually, so I always wanted to go to grad school. I come from a family of professors and academics. And it was always something I wanted to do, but I didn't really have like a clear job tied to like why I was going to grad school. And what I did have was a project I wanted to do. I've always been really interested in death and technology and how those two things kind of intertwine. And I found this program at the New School in New York in media studies that's really interdisciplinary, and it allowed me to kind of design this thesis project around Facebook's memorialization policies in death, which also kind of furthered my chance to look into like how we experience the internet, how we experience technology, and how we interact with each other in these digital spaces, and like what is normal and what is not when it comes to these like really prolific life moments like death.
So your experience is kind of like mine. I'll just talk a little bit about where I come from, and the similarity is that basically I come to content strategy or content design as somebody who picked up bits and pieces from the various areas that I've worked in or been exposed to. So I originally come from a UX background, and I got into UX because I realized that I was working at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco doing their online curriculum. And I realized that I loved putting together information. I loved just the design of the information, the questions you have to ask around the use cases, working with subject matter experts to really get that information designed in a way that was going to engage students. And so because I found that love, I ended up going to grad school at University of Washington. I went to what was called then the Technical Communication Program, which is now the Human-Centered Design and Engineering Program. They've really focused a lot more on sort of the UX end of things, which is appropriate because that's essentially what they've been teaching this whole time. And I started out in the UX world working agency, and I worked agency for really quite a long time, got a lot of experience that way. And I found that as I was working on project after project, what I noticed is that The information, the part of me that loved organizing information was really focused on the words. I enjoy the visual aspect of doing UX design, but I'm not as astute at it as I am with the words. And so I found myself gravitating toward the words. And I started developing processes around how we could develop content in a way that had some systematicness. That's not a word. Systematicness around it. So I developed a content audit, and I didn't even know it was called a content audit. I just developed it because I knew that we had to have an understanding of all the content that was out there. Eventually, I realized that there were other people out there doing this and that they were calling themselves content strategists. And so I got connected with the content strategy community, started reading the Little Red book by Christina Halverson, and then started reading a lot of other books around that, like Content Strategy for Mobile by Karen McGrain. Those were kind of my entry points. And I went back to my job and I said, I want to be a content strategist. I think we have enough work here. I think I could do this. And they said, yeah, but I don't think we have enough work to have you as full-time content strategist. So I said, okay, cool. I'm going to go freelance and you can give me projects. And they did. And they kept me actually employed full-time for another few years after that. I did then start to diversify my projects, diversify my client base. And I worked freelance for about 6 years. No, it was more like almost 10 years. And then that's when the hairstylist gigs happened. I had kind of a midlife crisis. I had some deaths in the family. I had a bunch of things that happened in my life that really made me kind of reel back and ask, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? I was also experiencing a little bit of burnout. And so that all kind of precipitated the move into doing hair. And then, as I mentioned before, I've come back to content strategy, and I'll talk a little bit about that later once we talk about kind of that transition piece. But that's my background and how I ended up in the content strategy world. So for you, Lily, I wanted to find out a little bit about, from the recruiter's perspective, what would make you consider somebody who's just breaking into the field? So let's say you've got me or Theo coming at you, breaking into the field with a little portfolio in hand. What would make us stand out for you, and what would you really want to see in that person to make them?
It's funny. I just saw a question come through from Karen Z about that. She's a college student that's interested in going into UX design, or, whatever field it might be. Make sure that, if you're going to do it, first of all, jump into it and do it, but make sure your resume, your CV, whatever you want to call it, is updated. Show me what you've done, not just like, I want to do this job. Well, why do you want to do this job? And what have you done to take those steps to get into this role, right? And then don't be afraid to reach out to people that are already in the position or already in that world. You want to break into it. You want to find out how that person got into it as well. You want to hear their experience, what it's been like, what they had to do to get into that field. Because going into it blind, it can be done. But if you have people that you can reach out to, a community, or even people on LinkedIn, friends of friends, other recruiters, then go for it. Don't ever be afraid to reach out. And again, just make sure that your resume, your LinkedIn, your CV, your portfolio, everything is updated, because that's what we want to see. Like, we want to see that someone's been proactive and is really, really taking the steps to go into the field that they want to go into. Because there's nothing, I've spoken to candidates where they say they want to get into a particular field, but they can't give me the why, and they can't give me, they don't show any passion for it. And for me, that's a little bit of a red flag. Maybe you're nervous, and that's fine. That's legit. But really, I want to know that this is what you want to do, and I want you to show me the why and the how. It's really important. So, and again, no fear. Reach out to people because people are more than happy to talk to you through their process.
I think that's a really important point, and that is something that was that was the jumping off point for me when I was coming back into the field. Was I just cold called basically some former colleagues and said, hey, would you have time to chat with me about where things are at these days with content strategy? What are the practices now? What are the tools that are being used now? Who's been really involved in talking about interesting topics in content strategy? What conferences should I go to? And reaching out was the number one biggest and best thing that I could have done to be able to reintegrate myself into the world.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, we did that together. You and Ariel, like we talked and it was awesome. Like even as somebody who is like a little further along, it was really great to talk to somebody else about what they were looking for and what they were looking at. But like so much of my discovery, so much of the groundwork I did to be ready when an opportunity presented itself was like going to everything that I could, going to things like this. I think I met Larry Swanson at a conference and like randomly tried to pick your brain. Like I just tried to talk to as many people as I could whenever I could and like make those connections and make those friendships. Because that's how you start with like hearing about jobs. That's how you start understanding like what people are looking for and like how to present yourself.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of brings me to another question, which is how did you find out about jobs? And it sounds like some of it was talking to people. I'm sure there's resources out there. Just curious a little bit, like what your path was in that respect.
It was a mix of stuff, you know. I mean, I would have been really lucky in so many ways. Like my partner does not work in my field, but he does work in tech and has been in tech for a really long time. So like I got to meet a lot of people who worked at big companies and I live in San Francisco. Like obviously like we're in a different time now, but in the pre-pandemic times, like by proximity, I was close to a lot of things that were happening. And so it was a lot easier to like find those people and find those things. In terms of like finding actual jobs, I mean, like during my like actual job hunt, which was like in the midst of the pandemic, I hate to say it, but like I honestly just like searched LinkedIn a lot. Like I set up a lot of automated searches on LinkedIn, but like I think you have to take it a little further than that. Like that's how you find a position. And then from there, like when I was looking for internships, for instance, like that's how I would find an internship, or that's how I would find a position I wanted. And then from there, I would say, okay, like who do I know who has a connection at this company? Or like, can I reach out to somebody and introduce myself and ask for an informational interview and like get to know somebody and try and get my foot in the door that way? I'll always say like, I think it's super great to reach out to people, but like introduce yourself if you're gonna like cold email people. Cause I've gotten like weird random emails from people being like, can you like recommend my partner for this job at your company in like a department you don't work in? And I'm just like, I can't, sorry.
I don't know you. Oh my God.
I don't know you or your wife. I'm so sorry.
Come to my life.
Yeah, I'm sure it's way worse for you, Lily. But like on a more serious note, like I think like using the internet to find those things, and like I will say like LinkedIn is not a very curated way of doing it. Like I think groups can be a lot better. Like there's a really wonderful content and like content design UX writing Slack group that I think is one of the best things out there, and they're really cool about like posting really like well curated jobs that you can actually kind of get in touch with somebody about. I always hesitate to recommend Facebook groups because I don't really think there are any good ones, but those can be a thing as well. I mean, I found out about my job hunt from a LinkedIn post that I randomly saw and like cold messaged the person who posted it, who is now my boss. So you never know what will happen.
Yeah, see, don't be afraid to reach out. Really. And if you're with the whole, I know someone asked about education, if that is critical. I mean, I have a degree in speech communication and anthropology.
Yeah.
And I work in HR, and I've been in HR for 25 or so years. So
yeah.
Should I have gotten into marketing? I don't know, maybe, but
No.
Chances
I don't
are
think-
I probably would have sucked at it. And it's not something that I, was really passionate about. But I loved recruiting in HR, and here we are today. So
I just don't want anyone to think that like education is something that's going to like stop them from getting into this field, because like anybody can do this job. Like it is a hard job. It takes a lot of work, but like anybody can do this. And we should be like a really warm and welcoming community. Like I am so excited for people who want to come in and like try their hand at UX writing, and thinking you have to get a certain degree or a certain certificate. I know we just heard about a great certificate program, and those could be a great way to fast track your way into something, but like you don't need a specific thing. Like if you can do the work and like learn the things you need to do to like do the job, like there's no one way into this.
Yeah. And for me, that has a lot to do with knowing yourself and knowing what your learning style is. Like, I'm very much a schooly kind of person. And so a lot of the learning that I've done has been academic in nature. And in fact, when I was trying to kind of get myself re-upped on content knowledge, I did take some classes online. I did a certification for the UX writing certificate from the UX Writers Collective. And I did go ahead and take the time and spend the money to do those kinds of things, because that's my learning style. But what Theo said is absolutely true, which is that by reading the books, talking to the people, going to the conferences, you can get the background that you need. You just have to be proactive about putting it together. So instead of just absorbing all of this knowledge, you have to start putting it into practice. And I think that's a really important piece of getting a job, is that you have to have some experience of putting the theories into practice and be able to speak to those. And the way that you speak to those is by doing them.
Yeah, 100%. I think like the doing part is so important. And like the thing that I look for when I talk to people, if I'm like on a hiring committee or if I'm, listening to interviews, is like, I want to know how people work. Like I can teach people how to write. Like I think anyone can learn how to write. Like most people can learn user experience concepts. Like those are things that can be like easily taught. And like the thing that's harder to teach sometimes is like, how do you communicate and how do you work with other people? And like that's a really important thing to develop as well, in addition to like the skills that are directly going to translate into doing this specific position. And it's so critical for what we do. It's just like so cross-functional and just all about like negotiating and communicating across teams. At least it is for me. I don't know how it is at Expedia.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the way it is as well. I kind of have the same criteria when I start doing, because I jumped right into being part of hiring teams, because this is a topic that I'm pretty passionate about and that I feel like I've done some legwork in. So when I speak to people who I'm looking to hire, I do want to see some degree of credibility, that they know the UX concepts, that they understand what the design process is. And there's various ways of talking about the design process. There's a lot of different models, but can you talk to me about one or two of those? Can you tell me that you've been immersed in this subject area enough to be able to talk to me about some of the basic tenets? But more important is the person's ability to synthesize information and come back and communicate it. That's way more important to me. All of that said, I think it's also important to be honest about your strengths and your gaps. So, we're being very encouraging here because it's true. I think anybody can do this. But I also think that it's important to know, like I said, to know yourself and to know what your strengths are and what your gaps are. I don't want to say weaknesses, because they're never weaknesses. They're just places you have some learning to do. And being systematic about that is one way that you can kind of overcome any ideas of imposter syndrome. So look at job descriptions and write down the areas that you have, that you know that you have that skill set. give that a check mark. Areas where you don't think that you have the skill set, look at it and say, do I want that skill set? You may not want that skill set. That may not be up your alley. And I'm really riffing from Tamara Adlin here, who did a great article about how to copy paste yourself into your dream job. That's the title of the article. But her point is that instead of letting those job descriptions kind of break down your confidence, let them be something that guides you into where you want to go. So some of these skills, you might look at them and say, let's see, they want somebody who can think strategically. Well, hell no, I don't want to think strategically. Well, you're going to put aside jobs that include that. That's just not going to be your strong wheelhouse. Maybe you're more tactical. Maybe that's your strong suit. And so as you go through these job descriptions and know what you do want to do and what you don't want to do, the skills that you don't have that you do want to do, you can educate yourself. You can always find some way to educate yourself. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a course. It doesn't have to be a grad school program. It could be, but it could also be getting yourself a mentor, getting into the UX coffee. What is that called, Theo? The UX coffee hour?
Oh, UX coffee hours. Yeah.
Yeah. And talking to some of the folks on UX coffee hours. And those are all folks who have signed up who are willing to talk to people about the field.
It's so great that you're talking about this too, because this is something you're going to do for your entire career. It's something I find myself still doing, even though I've like found myself in this job, and I'm like, okay, well, like, what else do I need to work on? Like, and I feel like I feel really lucky that like my manager puts a really high premium on, figuring out like our development plans and like making plans around like our goals and things like that. And so it's like gives me a lot of time to think about like where I want to increase strengths and like where I want, like what things I want to learn to become a stronger all around like content designer in the future. And also on the other side, like things I don't really care about and don't want to do as much of, and like figuring out how I can do less of those and more of the things I actually like.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to hear a little bit from Lily about this. What does it look like from the recruiter side when you're thinking about credentials or education or skill set and things like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 4-year degree thing, it's at least for most of the jobs that I've recruited for, it's not necessarily a requirement. It's a nice to have. If you have it, great. But I really want to know your process, and again, the how or the why as to the field that you're looking into, and what your interest in or what your interest is in that field. And then also, as far as your resume and your portfolio in this time and age and the stage that we're at as far as a pandemic and COVID, some people might have a gap in their resume. It's legit. We all understand this is a weird time. People have been laid off, or people are really super burned out right now because we're all working crazy hours right now. So if you have a gap on your resume, at least for me, I don't think that should be held against you. Like, if you have an explanation, if you want to provide it to me, great. That's not a ding for me. Again, I want to know that this is what you want to do. I want to hear your passion. I want to hear the steps that you're taking to get into the field. I mean, really sell yourself to me as far as what you're looking for, because that's going to make you stand out as a candidate to a recruiter. Like, we love to hear your stories, and not just the bullet points that are on your resume. Like, give me a little bit more. Tell me the story. Tell me everything, and don't hold back. Like, it's okay. It's okay. Don't feel like you need to I guess
button it up.
Yeah, just don't. Have some fun. I mean, maybe I'm just a little bit different from most people, but really just tell it like it is. Because I be a straight shooter, because that's what I want. when I'm talking to a candidate.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I kind of, the article that Paula had mentioned that I wrote, that's kind of what I closed with was, I really feel like being yourself is the best possible thing for bringing to the table, because think about it, you don't want to sell somebody a lie and then show up to work and have to be pretending to be somebody that you're not.
Yep.
Especially in our day and age and in the tech industry. I think it's okay to be human. I think it's really, I don't think it's our parents' generation where, you know, you had to be a certain way in order to be considered professional. That said, definitely, you know, be professional. Don't talk about your personal life. I think that's a line that, interestingly, when I was a hairstylist, people always wanted to cross with me. They always wanted to know what my drama was. And I just wouldn't talk about it. For me, that's just not a line that I need to cross. Now, if I had become friends with a client, which did happen in a couple of instances, then over coffee, we can talk about my drama, but not while I'm your professional doing your hair. That just kind of, to me, that's a line that I draw. But that said, I will also drop an F-bomb at really inopportune times. And that's just me being me. And I've never gotten dinged for it. I think people kind of laugh and loosen up a little bit sometimes when I drop an F-bomb. So the moral of the story is, I think authenticity speaks well of a person. And what I'm hearing is that recruiters like that too.
Yeah, but for sure, I agree with Ariel 1,000%. Leave your drama at home. Don't bring it to the interview. Of course, you know, again, when I say be a straight shooter, don't be too buttoned up. Of course, be professional, but I don't want to know what's going on at your house. Like, I just leave it out there. I don't care.
Well, I think it really like kind of, I think it begs to question, like, what is professionalism now in 2021? Is it 2021? Is that the year? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like, we're all in each other's houses. Like, I have my background blurred right now, but there's some plants, and like, you could potentially see my living room. Like, what is professional now? And I really like that distinction of like, don't bring your drama into the room. It's like, I want to know about you. I don't mind like getting to know people with like their messy bits and their fun things and their like maybe traditionally not so professional pieces, but like, come as a whole person who I can trust to do something, you know?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I like it.
Yes.
Whole person that I can trust to do something. That's
Yep.
a good standard.
Yep.
I just want to know I can depend on you to like be a good partner in work.
Yeah.
And maybe have some fun as we do that. Fun is not a requirement, but it's nice.
It's nice, isn't it? It's so much nicer when you have fun at your work.
It is.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It can't all be serious all the time.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Have some fun, but
And
also
rarely serious.
get your shit done. There. I'll just throw that out there.
I love it. Spoken from the mouth of Lily.
So much worse could be happening coming out of my mouth, but I'm gonna rein it in.
Well, I think that basically we've gone pretty deep on everywhere that I wanted to go deep on. Do you guys have any other areas that you wanted to make sure that we talked about before we go into questions?
No, I mean, we're going to share a bunch of resources after this, which
Yes.
is cool. I see lots of questions about like sharing resources. I'm always also like, I have a whole list of books and things. Like, find me on the internet. I will give them to you. I love to talk to people about books and other things.
Yeah, so speaking of which, I'm going to go ahead and put that up now, share that. And these slides are going to be available to you guys. It's there's just a couple of little slides, but here's a number of resources that I've pulled together, that we collectively pulled together, specifically having to do with learning and how you can learn around the subjects that have to do with content design, UX writing, content strategy, and then some resources that have to do with job searching, places where you can find job listings, including that Slack channel that Theo mentioned, which does have some good curated jobs. We've had some really excellent jobs posted up at this meetups Slack channel as well. We are hiring at Expedia if you are interested.
Oh, we're hiring at PayPal also. Sorry, going to steal your thunder. I forgot.
Everybody's hiring.
Literally everyone is hiring. I'm not
Seriously,
joking.
everyone
But
in
also,
tech is hiring.
But Expedia, PayPal, and I guess I have to say Dropbox also are all the best places to like come work at our places. That's what we're trying to say.
Places, for sure, for sure. So with that, I would love to turn it over to some of the questions that we've gotten.
Yeah, we definitely have a good queue going. Let me back up to, but the first question is from John, and I want to read it exactly here. John asks, what's the difference between content designer and content creator?
That's an interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah, that is an interesting one.
For me, the distinction really has to do with the primary function of the job, which is as a content designer, to me, that is looking at the overall experience of the words, but not just the words, the other content as well, images, videos, things like that, and thinking through that user path and that story that you want to be telling. And then sometimes as well, you're also going to be a content creator as part of that job. So I don't know about you guys, but I do some UX writing as part of my job as a content strategist, right? But the job is wider than that. The job is a lot wider than just creating content. So that to me,
yeah. I would also add that like, I don't hear people asking about the definition, like the difference between content creator and content designer, but I do hear people constantly asking and arguing about the difference between content designers and UX writers and other titles that we might have. And I have a somewhat unpopular opinion that like, I don't think there's much of a difference most of the time because every company uses those titles differently. And I would say focus less on the title and more on the description of like what you'd actually be doing and figure out if that aligns with what you're up to. And stay out of like any argument about those titles because like it's a waste of time.
Ooh, and on that, read the job description.
Yes. Oh my God, please read the job
please
description.
read the job. I mean, I've had folks just apply because the title sounded or looked like something that they've done in their past, but the job description itself is like,
or
very,
recruiters,
very much
no offense, Lily, you're probably great at this, but sometimes people don't really name their job correctly or put something in there very well. So like, you know, I get all kinds of stuff that I see where it's like, oh, like it's a like UX writer, and I'm like, this is a copywriter position, like we're in marketing, like this is not at all a UX writing job. But like somebody heard that they had to have a UX writer at their company and decided like, well, I'll just slap this on a marketing copywriting job. So read the descriptions, be discerning.
Yeah, definitely read the descriptions. It's not a trick and it's not a trap, but really read it.
Mhm.
One other thing I'd say about content creator is that I hear that term bandied about most often in marketing contexts. So for people who need to create lots and lots of content in order to not spam, but you know what I mean.
Video, well, it's like video to like market to people, video content, social campaigns, like things with campaign in the title.
Yeah.
Hey, this next question, I know Lily, you kind of proactively answered this one, but I want to put it out there just in case Ariel or Theo have anything to add. Karen asked about, would you have any recommendations of what to do for someone who's interested in getting into UX design? She's a college student right now.
Start reading books. Read books. There's a lot of really good books out there. Hit Theo
all
up
the books.
list.
I've got so many books. I have a huge stack of UX books right next to me on my desk right now. There's like one side is like books about death and one side is books about UX. That's how I organize my life. Yeah, I would second that. Read whatever you can and just also like I feel like with design, it's a little easier to play. Like before I got into UX writing, I was looking into UX design and I was in a design course that like we got to in grad school. and we got to kind of pick like some projects to work on. And I always tried to pick user experience projects, like things that would really let me flex that. And like, I would design an app for one of my things. Like I would, if we were on a group project, I'd pick as much stuff as I could that would like let me use those tools that I wanted to get better at and use those skills that I was learning in experience design. Just like try and just do stuff, even if you don't have a job that's letting you do that or a thing, like make projects for yourself and just practice.
Yeah.
I want to just, sorry, I'm going to just kind of jump in on that for a second, just because I do have a question about this, and maybe it's kind of a question for Lily. And, you know, absolutely here we're like sharing all these resources, saying, you know, here's some great books to read and podcasts to listen to and stuff. But in terms of like kind of showing up with any actual experience or skills, you know, I think you could easily spend your life doing nothing but going to conferences or reading books or listening to podcasts or whatever. But, you know, to what extent, if I were to, you know, if someone were to show up for a job interview and say, well, I've listened to all the podcasts, I mean, what would you rather hear someone say? I mean, and none of that is bad, right? But I mean, Theo just mentioned kind of finding opportunities to just sort of do something even proactively, or sort of say, I've designed this thing. Do you have thoughts about that, about kind of how do people get kind of beyond the sort of, you know, the kind of understanding things from an, I want to say sort of academic perspective, right? Like I've read about it, I know about it theoretically, to I actually have some hands-on experience with it. And do you have thoughts about what kinds of, while you're still getting started, what kinds of hands-on experience, you know, would you sort of consider useful or, you know, kind of worth mentioning in an interview?
As far as the projects that someone has taken on, or you know, if they've taken courses online or in person or however, whatever the case may be, put that in your portfolio. If you haven't already started one, start one so that we can see examples of what you've done. I mean, I've had candidates show up empty-handed, and that's tough because you can say that you've done something, but I want to see it. I want to see it, and I want to hear your process. So if you haven't already created some sort of a portfolio, please do. We love visuals.
Yeah,
I've never interviewed for a job that didn't want a portfolio.
Yeah.
Of some kind.
same.
Mm-hmm. We want to see it.
Yeah.
And I think
like
what
go ahead.
artifacts you want to put in your portfolio, look at other practitioners' portfolios. That's a really good way to understand what artifacts are common and are being looked for. But I also feel like the books that you read they're all going to have opinions about what the important artifacts are of the job. And you kind of have to wade your way through it. You have to become critical about what this deliverable is and why you're doing this deliverable. And so to me, being able to say why you're doing a particular deliverable is also a really important part of the portfolio, is being able to explain that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also really worth like looking at your past work. Like, I mean, I talk to a lot of people who have come into UX writing through some other kind of writing, like marketing or journalism or something like that. And like, those things can go in your portfolio if you learn how to present them right. Like I had very little actual UX writing stuff in my portfolio when I was first getting going. I had things that I was able to kind of twist and present as UX because I was able to like identify pieces of that would speak to those skills. But it wasn't, you know, I hadn't come into that job or that project as a UX writer. I came into it doing something else. So, you know, like really think about like what you've been doing in the past and like think about how you can try and present that as something that will serve this new goal. And also volunteer. I think volunteering can be really great. There's a ton of nonprofits out there who would love help with some kind of content design or UX writing. Like if you're hungry to like work on an actual project that you can get into your portfolio, like I know I think there's some networks online that you can find people, but like hit up your favorite nonprofit and ask them if they want some help with their website. usually they'll say yes.
It's a great, great, great tip because it's very true.
And you're doing something good for somebody nice.
Mhm.
I hope somebody was taking notes right here. That's a great list of stuff. Hey, the next one, the next question came in anonymously, and I think you'll see why. For someone who's being approached with many senior positions, this is someone who's been around for a while, where would you recommend to go? To be specific, they've been urged to go to big tech, but can get paid equivalently by another smaller but respectable company that will demonstrate that they value you more. I guess in their bottom line question is, how important is it to have a big tech name on your resume?
I mean, I think it really depends on what that person wants to do. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if any of us can answer that question for them. Maybe you guys, maybe Lily and Ariel can, but I feel like that's a pretty personal decision to make.
That's the actually that's the answer. Just depends on what you want to do, and you know, if you want to get into big tech, then by all means go for it. But if you prefer a smaller company, which some people do, then by all means, you know, do what you want to do. Don't do what everybody else is expecting or telling you what you think you should do.
You can
Go with your gut.
really healthy career either way.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is just about what you make of it. The nice thing about going to big tech is that you do have a name on your resume. It's like choosing colleges, right? Do you want to go to Harvard just because you can have Harvard on your resume? I mean, I wouldn't want to go to Harvard personally. It sounds like hell, honestly. And I went to a pretty competitive college, but Harvard just really sounds really competitive and like not fun. Anyway, that's just me. But that's not to say that having Harvard on my resume wouldn't be awesome. I just had to be really honest with myself about what I really wanted and where I wanted to go. So I went to a smaller college that didn't have as big of a name, and that was the right decision for me. I think with companies, the name on your resume is going to be way, way, way less important than that ability to describe your rationale and your thinking, and be able to express that you are able to do the work essentially, and you're able to think through it.
Yeah, it's the work
Mm-hmm.
versus the company. At least it is for, again, I might be an outlier, but at least it is for me.
I 100% agree. Like, I'm sure there's a ton of other great places within PayPal to work, but like, I just feel like I could never leave because I think I might be on the best team there. And like, I never thought I would be a big tech person. I never thought I would work at any large non-music company, but like, this is the happiest I've been in a job ever. And like, it's largely because of like who my team is and like what work I get to do and like all of these other things around me.
Cool. Hey, and our next question is from Paula. So Paula, if you want to elaborate, feel free to jump in. But she says that she hears a lot of people are hesitant to apply for a position if they don't have like 100% of the skills that are listed. How critical is it to match up item by item?
This was a question for Lily, just because I know that, you know, this comes up a lot where people say, well, there was this job looked so interesting to me, but, you know, of this list of like 15 bullet point items, I only had 10 of them or whatever, you know, like I worry that it actually stops people from, you know, I think I'm curious to hear your perspective as a recruiter, because sometimes I look at job descriptions, not that I'm currently looking, but I look at job descriptions and I think, that's a unicorn. I mean, you are asking for someone to do, you know, really senior level work, you know, but you're only asking for 2 years of experience or something, or, you know, whatever.
Right.
And so, you know, I do think it's maybe a topic for a whole other meetup, sort of, you know, what realistic job description is like. And I know there are a bunch of other questions in the chat here about kind of what is an actual day in the life, you know, what do you people actually spend your time doing? But, you know, as you're looking at those job descriptions, how nervous should someone be when they see a job description that they feel like, I've got maybe 75% of the way there, should I still apply for it or not? Because I think that in some cases really limits, the
Yeah.
people who will apply, because they're reading it too literally. And I wonder, I'm just curious to get your
Yeah.
perspective on that.
Don't be discouraged. I mean, 10 out of 15 is pretty good, I think, because chances are some of those other skills or those things that are listed as bullet points are you have transferable skills, right? If you're already looking or if you're already working in that field, chances are pretty good that you have transferable skills to what's listed on that job description. That being said, if you feel that your skills are junior and you're hesitant to apply, again, don't feel weird about reaching out to someone that works for that company or someone that is in that job, either through LinkedIn or however you're networking, to ask, like, do you think my skills or my experience are going to be too junior for this role? And if so, give me pointers on how I can further my experience and how I can get to where you're at. So that goes back to the whole, don't be afraid to reach out to people for an informational, for a chat, for a virtual coffee or in-person coffee, however it works. Because people want a knowledge share, we want to get you to where you want to be. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to speak to skills or experience that you think is going to be transferable or that you can make transferable. Chances are you can.
I think oftentimes job descriptions want to cast a wide net. So they want people to recognize themselves in something that the job description says. And so they often have rather long lists of qualifications. And so I think understanding it as being kind of casting a wide net, as opposed to we need you to have absolutely 100% every one of these things, is probably a good way to look at it. If it generally speaks to you, then I would say go for it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think it's a really good thing to use them as like a guide post, but like you don't need to follow it completely down to the letter. I don't think I had the exact number of years for the position I got, but like, especially number of years that are listed, I feel like every time I get into a job, people are like, oh, that was just like, so we could get a number of candidates. Like,
Yeah,
it's not really what we were looking at.
Yeah,
and
at a certain level.
Yeah, and also like hiring managers aren't always the ones who write positions, especially at large companies. So like, again, no shade to you, Lily, because I'm sure you were great at this. But I've heard from like hiring managers who are like, oh, an HR person wrote this in like a different department and they don't really know as much about this position as I do. And now that I'm looking at this position in front of me, like, this is not at all what we were thinking. So again, it's like, I think I know, I'm sure you do not do that, Lily, but like these things happen sometimes.
No, I've seen it, but I've seen it where I've talked to a hiring manager and I was like, where did this JD come from? I don't think this is what you want.
Yep.
Please edit this because this makes zero sense to me. Yeah.
I want to throw one thing in on that too, that I've seen a lot of data that in those situations where you match up 70% with the job description, that men are much more likely to apply than women. So just picture your knucklehead brother-in-law, and what would he do? And if he'd apply for it, you go ahead and do it. So
yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
Apply that logic also to salary negotiations.
Yes.
Like think about what a white man would get paid and ask for a little more than that.
Nice. The next question comes from Tracy, and Tracy asks, what are the most recommended tools being used now in the field? And Tracy, if you want to elaborate on that, if you're on the call, feel free to unmute and talk a little bit more about that.
Oh, okay. Thanks so much for highlighting that. So I'm a longtime writer for businesses. I started out in journalism and now do marketing and kind of create all kinds of content, short and long form. But so I'm curious about the differences with UX content versus marketing. But aside from that, what I've noticed with my different clients is that everyone struggles with asset management. Where all these different bits of images and content live and managing the workflow and all of that. So I'm just kind of curious. I've seen companies struggle, trying to put big systems in place and then no one uses them. So if you have any insight into what works at where you are, that would be really helpful.
I am working really hard to bring a Figma plugin plus app tool called Ditto into our workplace in order to manage all of the pieces of content. So that may be worth looking into. It does require that your files are in Figma, your UX files are in Figma, but to me, it's one of the few pieces of software technology that's really addressing content specifically. There's a much more robust program out there called Gather Content, which is a complete content management and production system and governance, and it just does it all. So that's another thing to look into.
Yeah, I do my absolute best to not touch any systems if I don't have to, because I'm a little lazy when it comes to that stuff. But I do really like, I really just like kind of live in Figma these days, and like I'm actually just now getting pulled into like, I think we're working on some new systems and stuff, and like I'm not sure how much I can talk about that, but yeah, I mean, I think it's different for every company. Like again, like Figma is really great for a lot of things. It's not really like content specific, but like I really like it, and I find it really great for like managing my own little things and keeping track of stuff. I also like a good old fashioned spreadsheet or Word document or Google Doc if that's where you're in. I think there's a lot of, I'm very much like working on the fly a lot of the time, and I just like try and figure out what's going to work for different things. And different companies have different needs and structures. So I don't feel like there's really like one best thing, but I'm also not like a content strategist per se. And I feel like that might be more of a content strategist thing.
Working with the tools, yeah.
People love talking about CMSs, and I'm like, I don't really have anything any input on CMSs.
Yeah, I'm not that either. Not that content strategist either. Paula
Not that kind of girl.
Knows a ton about CMSs.
Yeah.
I'm actually doing a talk about that at Button in a few months.
There you go.
Curious,
talk to Larry.
Product content management. Yeah, but if anybody has any thoughts about that, feel free to reach out because I'm doing research for that talk now. But let's get to the next question. Azalea asks, and this has come up before again, but I want to make sure that you all have a chance to address anything else about it. Many internships state that they want people with a 4-year degree. Is that a strict requirement, or can you get by with experience like in your portfolio and your resume?
For legal reasons in the US, you have to be in some kind of a program. I'm seeing a lot of places be okay with, and I'm speaking generally, like, I don't know if I can't speak for every company, but what I've observed is somebody who did apply for internships, like they want you to be in some kind of a program. It could be a graduate program, it could be a certificate program. Like I'm seeing, especially with like engineering internships, like a lot of people are fine with people coming in from boot camps, and I'm seeing that as well with like UX design boot camps, I think. So usually they want you to be attached to something. I don't know if that's a hard, fast rule, but that's generally what I've observed.
That's what I've seen as well. Most of the companies that I've worked for, you're either in some sort of a program or again, a boot camp in order to get an internship. Jobs, another story, but internships, yeah. Yeah,
I have not seen internships require a 4-year degree. That's kind of counterintuitive. An internship is something that you do while you're in the process.
While you're in it, yeah.
Earning a degree. So
yeah.
That's interesting to me, Azalea, that you are seeing internship applications that want 4 years of completed work.
Right. Because aren't most internships while you're still like,
I thought
while you're in it,
was that they want you to be in a program. I didn't realize the question was that you had to be finished with a program.
Oh, yeah. I can clarify, Azalea.
Yeah. Actually, what I meant by was a lot of them like want you in like a 4-year or 2-year degree program. I didn't mean like finished or anything.
Okay. I interpreted. Got it. So yeah, what everybody else said.
Okay. Hey, I think this next question, I think we covered it in the chat, but I just want to make sure. Theo, you mentioned a group. I think you were talking about the content and design Slack, the one that Jess Sands runs.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we
Sands is
dropped that.
amazing.
Okay, so we did get that. We dropped that in the chat. So okay, just wanted to
I think
clarify
somebody
that.
did.
Yeah. Then the next question. Sorry. Oh, and let's see. So Tracy asked that one. Oh, and Tracy had another question. How do you distinguish between UX writing and other marketing writing?
I love that question.
I
because
do.
I have strong feelings about it. Ariel, you want to take it?
I think we should both express our feelings.
You go first.
To me, there's a significant difference between the two. And it has to do with what the purpose of the writing is. To me, product content is about being invisible, to really being so much a seamless part of the journey and so much a part of the experience that people almost don't even notice it. It's just so good that you don't notice it. And so that to me is the goal with product content. Marketing content, on the other hand, wants to be seen and it wants to be heard because its job is to convince. And that's an important job as well. It just is a very different kind of job from what I see product content doing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction. My oversimplified and sort of similar one is like marketing content is trying to sell you something and product content is trying to get you somewhere. And I think sometimes those things overlap occasionally. Like I do collaborate with marketing on things sometimes because like we have product pages that are like entry points and we want to make sure that we're covering any relevant value props. And like I try to work in different kinds of things, especially working on like charity stuff. Like we have a lot of different like benefits that charities can get by signing up to like be a PayPal charity or something. And like we want to communicate like what those things are, but that's going to be within the user experience sometimes. So like there's some overlaps, but like they do feel very different and distinct to me.
Thanks for that. I guess where I'm confused is a lot of my time is spent with the web team, the web development team, creating content for websites. And, while I'm paid by the marketing team, I feel like we're not trying to sell anything. We really are trying to create a seamless experience. So it feels similar to me, but.
You're probably doing more along the lines of UX writing.
Yeah, people don't really know where to put us sometimes at their companies.
Yeah, it's true.
And sometimes we end up in marketing.
A lot of times, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of overlap between the two as well. So as Theo was saying, I think that you could go on for days about sort of where those overlaps are, but I try to make a distinction that's pretty simple.
Yeah.
I
like yours a lot.
Because websites are products too. That's why. So you get, anyhow.
Right.
I'm sorry, so you were going to say something?
No, I just said right. Websites are products too, right? So.
Yeah.
Ben, no.
Okay,
go on.
And Karen had a question around, and Karen, if you're around and want to elaborate on this, she asks, would you recommend getting certificates revolving around helping improving skills with UX? And I assume that's general UX, not specifically UX writing. Is that correct, Karen? Maybe she's not here. But anyhow, any advice on that, on improving UX skills?
I think assuming that she is talking about general UX skills, I would say that as a content designer, you need to know the UX concepts, not necessarily have a full certificate in UX design. So I think a lot of that the UX concepts can be learned from reading and reading kind of the basic tones, like Elements of User Experience by Jesse James Garrett. That's a really important one. Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. That's more about usability, but that's another classic tome. I think you can get the gist of UX from reading books. Doing a certificate program is really going to give you a lot of more practical hands-on knowledge, and you're going to be working a lot literally in Figma or Sketch, drafting interfaces. And I don't do that as part of my job. I mean, sometimes a little bit, but only in service of showing the experience that I expect out of my content.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's helpful to have those skills. Like, I'm a better content designer because I, can work comfortably in Figma and like do my own things and move things around, sometimes not to the delight of my design partners. But like, I think I know just enough to be dangerous, and like, it's really helpful. That's actually something like I want to work more on, is like some of my formal UX training. And like, again, you don't need a certificate, but like, if you want an extra boost, like that can be an extra thing. Like, and if you're able to do it, like those things can be prohibitively expensive, and like not everyone can do them. But if you can, like that could be helpful. It's not going to hurt you, I think.
Definitely not going to hurt you.
No.
For sure. I think having a clear understanding of UX principles and being able to speak to them is a big part of our jobs.
Oh, thanks. Lily, did you want to say anything about that? Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute and they answered them beautifully. So
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure. And I just want to point out, Heidi, these weren't really questions, but Heidi dropped in the chat and noted that like places like Udemy and other online courses will often offer scholarships if you're unable to, like if you're out of work or have other considerations. And she also pointed out that a lot of the conferences now offer equity scholarships. So in terms of that education stuff, so just be aware that don't be put off by price tags, kind of poke around the websites and see if you can find the scholarships and other help that's available.
That's how I went to Confab. I went on a scholarship.
And yeah, I was on scholarship as well. And my scholarship story was that I just, as a hairstylist, just had not made enough money to afford an $895 ticket. That's just the way it was. But I was truly passionate about coming back into the field, and they offered me a scholarship, which is really wonderful.
Yep, I was a broke grad student.
Nice.
So just email somebody. Email somebody if you're interested in doing a thing, and like sometimes you can figure out a way.
Nice. Next question comes from Jim. Jim specifically directs this one to Lily. How short of a job duration is too short? If you were only there three months or 6 months before moving on, is that still seen as bad, or is that better represented as a gap in your resume if you do something?
That's actually a really good question, and I've gotten that quite a bit just in general. If some people have a 3-month contract, and that's why you have a 3-month job, or some people have a 6-month contract, or if you're freelancing, sometimes that's just the duration of the project that you're working on. That's okay. I will never hold that against someone. You can always explain it to me in the interview process, or you can put that in a cover letter. But it's not a ding against you. It's not a ding. So
cool. Thanks.
Short, sweet little assignments, short, sweet contracts. It's fine.
Excellent. The next question is from Wanda. She asks, I'm switching careers after being a journalist for 10 years. And she asks Ariel and Theo, what does your day-to-day work look like? What's your best advice in terms of switching careers?
Are we both waiting for the other person to say something?
Yeah. Somebody has to talk.
That's a tough one.
What is my day-to-day? Is the heart of this question, what does my day-to-day look like? Yes. Yeah, I don't know. I part of why I like this job is because my day-to-day is not really, there is no like real day-to-day. What does this look like? It's sort of different all over the place. I will say, like, I think a lot of it is like balancing time in meetings and like getting information and talking to people and reviewing stuff versus like finding time for like heads down, like focused work on my own. Like, I think that's my main thing. Like there's two different modes in my day. There's like meetings and talking to people and like shutting everything down and like hiding from people so I can do things without talking to anybody. It's two extremes I operate well in.
That's my day too, definitely. And I work mostly with people in Geneva. So it's like my morning is just boop, 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 meetings.
Yeah.
And those are important because you have to be able to communicate about the products that you're working on, and you that crossover time and that face-to-face time is important for collaboration. So those are really important times, but that heads down time in the afternoon that I get is my time, and that's important for me to be able to actually get my work done. And when I say get my work done, what I mean by that is usually some measure of doing content inventories, writing content, coming up with strategic decks, PowerPoint decks, etc., where I'm really looking at what are the user needs, what are the business needs, and what does the product need to respond to. So those are kind of the different levels of work, actual work product that I do in those heads down times.
Nice.
Yeah, I also have like collaborative heads down, I guess, as well. It's like I work with really closely with like a couple designers, and one specifically, and she and I have working sessions as often as we can, just the two of us, to like sit down and like go into a Figma folder together and like go through and like move things around and talk through things and figure out like what's going to work without like, and do it quickly. Like it can often be like a way of moving something forward fast if we both need to kind of like put our brains together.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she's the best. Shout out to Emily.
Hey, here's a really good one. What's the salary range for a content designer?
Ooh.
Ooh, that depends on
Yeah.
where you're at and what they have slated for that particular role, or what the level is. It could be anything.
Yeah, it really could be.
I mean, honestly, that's a great question. Also a little tough to answer depending on, again, level of experience and the level of the job and what your geo is.
Well, I've seen a lot of survey data out there that shows, mostly starting in the six figures or close to that and going up. And I know a lot of people in the industry who make, mid-career and not even super advanced people making like 150, 160. But that's in the tech world. I don't know what it's like if, and that's in the big tech world. Like, I don't know what it is like at startups or smaller businesses.
Yeah. I'd love to know like where I see those surveys too. And those surveys are really like a nice broad pulse point, but like if they're averaging data across the US, like that's not really that's not helpful to me, because it's like they don't always take into account geography. They're not always taking into account like organization, like what orgs those are and the size of them. Like, I think the best thing you can do is like think about where you want to work and like who you want to work for, and like go look up salaries for that.
Mm-hmm.
The H-1B visa database is an excellent resource for that. Also, like you have to think outside of base salary if you're going into tech as well, because like base salaries are cool, but like base salaries are super high in San Francisco because like that's what you need to make to like live here comfortably. And so like people also have bonuses and stock options, and there's a lot of other things that aren't just salary that you need to think about when you're looking at a job, which I'm sure Lily can speak to better.
Yeah. No, it's true. And for some positions, not every position, at least in big tech, will offer RSUs, right? So if you're in like MarTech or just in tech in general, chances are you're probably going to get RSUs, but there are also other roles where it's straight base or straight base and bonus, and that's it. And someone in Springfield, Missouri is going to be paid vastly different from someone who's in Seattle, Washington, for example. So,
RSU, Lily? Not Willie. You're not Willie, you're Lily.
I don't know who that is.
That's my dad channeling through me.
It's all right.
What's an RSU?
Restricted stock unit.
Sorry, I get excited about RSUs.
Equity.
Equity, baby. Okay,
Mhm.
got it.
Yeah.
Yep. And one last thing I'll point out about a lot of that survey data comes from like UX writing programs who are trying to recruit students. So just bear that in mind too. Yeah. Next question. Azalea asks, do Expedia or PayPal hire for internships?
Yes.
I assume she's talking about, are there paid internships?
Yep.
Not for content strategy.
Yeah, not at Expedia.
Not at Expedia. No.
Mm-mm.
I think we had a content person this summer. I've only been here for a year, so I don't know if that's like a new thing, but yeah, we do have interns and across our design and content team, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think at Expedia, it's mainly, tech or engineering devs, software devs, as far as internships. At least from what I remember.
Yeah.
That's definitely a summer ritual in Seattle, the Amazon and Expedia and Microsoft interns coming in. Catherine asks, she says, Ariel touched on this a bit, but Ariel and Theo, how did you settle on working with content in UX versus being a UX designer or focusing on another specialty like UX research?
Oh, yeah. Ariel?
I'm a word nerd. I just love words. That's kind of what it comes down to for me. I also find that I'm better at words than I am at interface design. So having tried my hand at both, I'm just not as, I think design is a really amazing skill set, and it's also an innate thing. It's a combination of learned and lived behaviors. And I don't have the lived part. I just don't have the knack for it. So that was part of it, but it really was more of a positive going toward something for me. Just finding them, I gravitated toward words and content.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I grew up studying art and design and doing a lot of work. And actually when I was a journalist, doing editorial design, which I feel was a real, I had a lot of flashbacks of that come back to me when I started doing UX design. And getting the chance to take some classes and play with things was fun, but I was just this isn't the thing that feels as natural as UX writing and content design. And when I realized that was a discipline within UX, it was oh, it married all of these different things that I really like and had the focus in the word nerdery, as Ariel put it, that I really like. I love UX research also. I get to do part of why I like what I do is I get to do all of those things, but UX research doesn't have to be my main focus. I get to focus on the words and also do the other things in a lighter capacity, which is much more in line with what I want to be doing.
Yeah, and specifically with regard to research, I almost gravitated toward that because my degree program that I was in, my graduate degree program, had a really strong usability testing program and lab. But to me, this question is about knowing yourself and knowing what your skill set is and knowing what you gravitate toward.
Totally.
Myself, I just knew that doing research and writing reports just wasn't going to be where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Hey, next question is from Irene. This is an interesting one. How do we find a UX recruiter to help us find an open role? I saw that Creative Circle is one of the largest contracting agencies, but I can never get a hold of a person. I guess she's asking, or maybe there's other agencies, or how would you find a UX recruiter to help you fill an open role?
Are you talking
well, and Irene,
in-house or?
Yeah, Irene, if you're on, please feel free to unmute and elaborate on that.
I mean, I've mainly only worked in-house. I think the last agency job that I had was in the 90s.
Okay, good.
Hi, this is Irene.
Oh, go ahead, Irene, yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I've been applying for open roles on my own, and like I'm having a harder time getting like any opportunities just because, you know, there's a million roles out there and there's a million applicants. So I figured if there's someone who can help like try to match you better than just applying blindly, that would be helpful.
Okay,
And I saw
see.
that Creative Circle was one of the largest like UX recruiting agencies, but I've never been able to get a hold of a person. It's just through their site, you just apply and hopefully you hear back, but most of the time you don't.
So no one's ever gotten back to you. That's interesting. No one's,
Yeah. Like, the only interviews I've gotten were the ones I've just applied on my own, but you know, I was just hoping that I could like broaden my range, or like maybe if there's a UX recruiter who's actually on a team or who works through an agency, they would be able to see like what skills I have and match me better to a role, because like maybe I'm just applying to like the wrong roles.
Yeah. So you're actually looking for an actual agency, like a recruiter, not necessarily someone who's working in-house, but an agency recruiter. So
either way, but I just couldn't see anyone who's like, because I know that UX writing itself is fairly new compared to like UX design and UX researchers. So I'm just trying to see if there's like an actual UX recruiter that can help you open that door, or at least like show you like there is like a role here.
No one that I know of. I have not heard of that person.
Next question. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something, Ariel?
No, go ahead.
Okay, good. Next question is from Megan. What do you look for in entry-level content designers? As a graduating senior, I'm worried about the current push for hiring in mostly senior roles.
Yeah, there are mostly senior roles out there, and that's a problem. That's just straight up a problem. I think part of it is because the discipline is relatively new. And the reason, and because it's relatively new and being defined as it's being done, you need senior people in there who have been in the business part a little bit longer. Because senior people, the difference really is that senior people are going to figure it out for themselves. Whereas junior people are looking a little bit more for mentorship because they're new at it, right? It makes perfect sense. But I think as the discipline grows and ages, we'll start to see a lot more junior positions opening up. I think it's just, unfortunately, we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Ariel, and I slightly disagree a little bit. I feel like as we're like, what we're doing as it is defined right now is sort of new to people, but like this work is not new, which I feel like this is the case. But I don't know, I understand why people want senior positions. I know that there's a need for that, but like I really want to see us welcoming more junior positions in, because like I think there's a lot of junior people who can figure it out and who can get in there and like do the work. And like I've been really happy to see that like PayPal has been hiring like some specific positions that are like made for people who are brand new. Like we've brought in some folks who are like fresh out of college or like new to content design, and like with the intention that, and like we're lucky to do that. Obviously not everyone's able to do that because we're a larger organization, we have a big content community, but like I think larger companies like that have a community of practice, like have so much less of an excuse to not be bringing in junior people to train. Like you have the senior people to train them and to mentor, and there's plenty of work for those junior folks to be doing. And like I think that's really what I want to see more of. Like I really want to see more large companies hiring at junior entry level like roles for real, and not just like entry level roles that require 4 years of experience. I've seen those
roles where you're going to get hired and thrown to the wolves. Like,
yeah, that too. Like that's not fair either.
Yeah.
Right. If you're hungry and you want to learn, you know, why not bring someone in like that? But also set them up for success. Don't just
totally
like have fun. Good luck.
Yeah.
Hey, to what you said, Ariel, I've heard Jared Spool and other UX leaders in general, just talking about UX in general, that's a problem across the field. And his hypothesis is that we're like 6 or 8 months of just backfilling with experienced people who can hit the ground running, and then they'll start building out. That's his theory. So we'll see.
Going with that, yeah.
Hey, Pete has a question about Button and other conferences. How much value do you get if the conference can only happen virtually instead of face-to-face? Seems like the intense networking and idea exchange would be stifled a bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I attended my first Button as a virtual conference. I've actually never been to any of these conferences in real life, and I got immense value out of them. I don't know about other people, but like I thought they were fantastic even. And especially Button and Confab do a really good job of like fostering community in a virtual space.
Yeah, my answer would be it just depends on how the conference is run.
Yeah.
Button and Confab do put a lot of emphasis on connection, and there's a Slack, very active Slack. They do fun things like karaoke. It's just little things like that that really help you kind of jive with people. I definitely met some people at Confab that I'm still in touch with. So I think if you create space for it, there's plenty of ability to interact in online conferences.
It can definitely be hit or miss for sure. Like I have gone to one or two virtual conferences that like I didn't feel were as valuable. But it just depends. I'd say like talk to folks, see who's going to be there, see who's speaking, see what they have planned. Go for free if you can, get someone else to pay for it. So at least you're not out for a conference fee.
Yeah, don't forget about those equity scholarships and other financial aid. It's a lot of it out there, because that's why sponsors sponsor those big events, is they love sponsoring people who wouldn't be able to otherwise afford it. That's one of the main reasons they sign up. So yeah. Hey, Nathan has a question about volunteer work. Oh, I'm sorry. Was somebody saying, were you saying something, Theo? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Nathan asks about regarding volunteer work. I see nonprofits and sometimes folks running for office who could use content strategy help. Is it risky to volunteer for arguably political projects? He says most work obviously is political in some way, but I think you get what he means.
I think as long as you align with the politics, then why not? I mean, that's your reality. I don't think that anybody from a recruiting standpoint is going to look at say, oh, he worked for Democrats, we're not going to hire him.
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter like what political party, like just if it's work and it's something that's going to help you, then
do it.
Right. Hey, and Paula point, there's been a number, I kind of skipped over a couple of questions about tools because we've talked about that a little bit, but Paula had a great point here. She says, I've been doing content strategy work for way more years than I want to admit, but I can honestly say that the tool I use most is Excel. And I can second that. Yes. What about you all?
I don't use Excel as much, but I definitely a Word doc and Excel.
I think we could have an entire meetup. And in fact, I'm actually thinking about that, a sort of tools roundup kind of, what are the best tools for all these different tasks? But it is true, I think good old Word and Excel or Google Sheets and Docs, if you prefer that, do tend to kind of play a big part. I'm going to go ahead. We're starting to see people dropping off here.
Yeah, I was going to check in with you, Paula, about that.
Yeah, it's getting late. Thank you, everyone, for joining our virtual event here tonight. Glad to see new and familiar faces. Thank you so much, Ariel and Theo and Lily. Obviously, this conversation could go on all night. Clearly, a lot of interest. For anyone who's still on, we've kind of tried to capture everything, all of the links and everything that have been shared, as well as the resources that Ariel has in the slides here. We will share all of this stuff afterward, and please take advantage of the generosity of our speakers here who are making themselves available to be contacted if you want to kind of reach out to them after this. Thank you again. And like I said, we will be back here September 14th to talk about structured content with Chris Saunders. Keep an eye on the meetup site, keep an eye on our Slack channel. And that's all. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you.